Welcome to A Conversation with a Community Leader. This is a new series of programs where we're going to interview community leaders throughout the community. It's sponsored by Leadership Kitsap, and I'm proud to host this program. My name's Cary Bozeman, and I'm the former mayor of the city of Bellevue and the former mayor of the city of Bremerton. I also served as the CEO of the Port of Bremerton, and I'm currently a port commissioner. And I'm proud to say our first guest on A Conversation with a Leader is my friend David Nelson, who is the editor of the Kitsap Sun. David, great to have you here. You're our first guest, and you're our first guest for a number of reasons, but you're one of the more influential people in our community because you're the editor of the local newspaper. So thank you for agreeing to join me today. Just to start out, David, what brought you to Kitsap County? What brought you to the Kitsap Sun?
The Kitsap Sun brought me to Kitsap County. I was working at a newspaper in northern Utah, and I grew up here, and so I'd always Skagit Valley. I'm a Skagit Valley native. So
what did your dad do in Skagit Valley?
He was a
or your
minister.
Mom?
My father was a minister. My mother was a nurse.
In Mount Vernon?
Retired now. Mount Vernon High School.
I love a part of the country.
Tulip Festival time.
Yeah.
Next week. So
You still have family up there?
I do. My parents are still in town.
Oh, great.
So there was always a desire to come back to the Northwest, and the Sun was looking for a assistant editor, kind of a lower level on the chain, and it worked out for me to come up. Scott Ware hired me, and then 2 years later was when Scott retired from the Sun.
Yeah.
There was kind of that was a time of change for the newspaper, a significant change. A number of senior leaders left, and I took over, and kind of the team, the leadership team we have now, is who moved in there, and so it's been 10 years
how many
now.
Years? 10 years?
10 years as editor of the Sun.
Well, I remember Scott Ware very well. He was just a wonderful man, and I think he's down in San Francisco now.
That's
or
correct.
Somewhere down in there. Really great guy. So, did you want to be in journalism or a writer when you were in high school and college?
No.
You didn't?
No, I happened into it in college. I started working on the student newspaper. I went to school at North Park University in Chicago, but it was just a way, something fun to do with a friend. It was very low level. We took a class and got to do this. And I left college and didn't have an interest in sticking with it. I went and worked in book publishing.
So, you're not a college graduate like Bill Gates.
I graduated.
Oh, you graduated.
I still graduated.
I thought you said you left college.
No. I'm sorry. I left college
okay.
without wanting to work at a newspaper.
I was trying to make a point nowadays
were.
that not everyone has to graduate from college to be successful.
Well, now I'm really going to scramble your thoughts, because then I went and got a graduate degree in journalism.
Wow.
So I did go to college. But that was I worked in an industry that was book publishing is very slow. It takes a long time to publish a book. And so after a couple years working, I said, it wasn't the pace that I like. I like that. That's how I live life. And
well, you got in the right business.
Daily publishing was the way to go, and that's how I got back into newspapers.
Oh, okay. Do you see yourself staying in the Northwest in this community? Are you now a true Northwesterner? I mean, you always have been. But
I am.
Yeah.
I intend to stay here. My wife's from Bremerton. We like living here.
I always wonder what the job of an editor of a newspaper is. What do you do?
Boy, it is different every time. It's different than it was 10 years ago. I make sure the place is running. You know,
You're the CEO.
I'm the CEO of that building, and it's interesting. A lot of people know we were purchased 2 years ago, and so that adds a layer of complexity.
And you were purchased by?
USA Today Network.
Yes.
And so it is different than it was before. We're part of a big group of newspapers, 120 papers. I'm just one of the editors. And so there's stuff that certainly has changed how we do our business because of that. But it's still my job to run the local property. You know, the primary thing is what stories you're doing, who's reading them, why are we doing them, are we doing them right? That's, end of the day, that's what you do. You also make sure there's coffee for the coffee machine, and
So
every other thing you got to watch.
That was where I was kind of going. How much influence do you have on what gets put in the paper?
We have a lot of influence. We have a lot of independence. People sometimes have that thought that we're being told what to do by someone. I'm not. We have independence on story selection. The opinion page is everything that I pick for it. The direction we take on things, kind of the even what we identify as the priorities. That's all locally decided.
So you meet with your staff every day and talk about this stuff? Or?
Yeah. It's a pretty informal. A newsroom is an interesting place. It's a wonderful place where there's not a lot of rigidity other than you got to hit your deadline to make sure the story is published.
Right.
But there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of conversation through the day. You know, a scanner is going, and that affects what direction you're going to run.
Right.
So we have a good team that collaborates, and all day long you're in touch with people. We do have times we sit down and plan also, of course. But
what do you do when you're not working at the Sun?
I'm a runner. I've always kind of that's my main hobby.
You look like a runner.
Yeah. I've been a runner since I was in high school. I'm not planning anything huge right now, but I like to, I've run marathons, and I coached Bremerton Jaguars track club for a number of years in town.
Probably good for you, because that's a pretty stressful place probably sometimes that you're working,
it
right?
Can be.
And you got to get the newspaper out, and you got to pay the bills. And
So
to have that kind of outside interest
is really important to me. Yeah, and it lets you see your town. You get out, lets you see the area, the region. You go run in the woods or wherever you like to be. So it's very good way to be outdoors. I do. My wife and I, well, we live not far from you actually, as you might know, and then we have a daughter. So we go to playgrounds. That's another thing.
How old is she?
4.
4. Wow. Your hands full for a while.
There's a lot to do.
Yeah. I have a daughter that's 50, and she still needs my attention once in a while. So it's a lifelong. How do you see your position as it relates as a community person? What do you see your role as there?
Gosh, I think I've always thought that we are kind of there's ears is an analogy I like to draw. We need to be listening to everything. I like to think of us as the ears rather than we're telling you. I don't like to think of it as we're trying to tell you all something.
Right.
We're trying to listen to what's going on. We're the ones paying attention when, frankly, so you don't need to. You don't have time to go to every city council meeting, so we have a guy who does, and he'll listen and be thoughtful and try to digest and try to share what you needed to know or what was important to your life. The other thing that I believe real strongly in is kind of our opinion pages and related website sections, but as a way of there's a conversation going on that doesn't occur if we're not there. Social media, it can influence that, it can be a part of it, but that doesn't take the place of it. Social media is too wide and broad and minuscule, but to distill, whether it's letters to the editor, columns from people in town, we've had a wonderful series lately. I don't know if you've been reading this guy Kevin Walthall. He came up with this as a way to ask people what their vision is for their city. I thought it was a great idea, and he's written about 6 pieces.
Yeah.
There's nothing special about him other than.
Him, and
did you? Good.
We're trying to get together for coffee.
Yeah.
Because I commented to him on a couple of things he wrote. I really enjoyed reading his stuff.
And I've heard that from a lot of people now. And so the idea that if a town has a newspaper, it can have a guy like Kevin, who he's not a professional. He's just concerned. He's interested in his city.
Got a good background.
He's a good writer. He's a smart guy, and he just wanted to do this. And we'll wrap it up at some point and leave it be. But if he makes someone think about it, and maybe someone else responds, I think that's a role that.
Yeah.
Without
Speaking of writers, we were sorry to lose Rob Oton.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a good person. Did a nice job for you, I thought, over the years.
Yeah, he really did. It struck me at his service was Saturday, And,
yeah, we were out of town, or I'd have been.
It was really good. It was a good service, and you know how funerals are interesting anyway because you learn stuff about people. But
I call them celebrations.
Yeah, and it was. This one really was. There was a lot of nice things.
A life well lived.
Yeah.
Right.
But it struck me at how I take it for granted sometimes that Rob could write something every week that was creative, that was thoughtful. That's a hard thing to do.
It is.
It really was difficult what he was doing, but he did. He kept going.
And he was honest.
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't always coming from a certain point of view. He would, anyway, I was sorry to lose it. I want to talk to you a little bit, David, about where newspapers are going. I'm older. I'm not a smartphone guy. I take 3 newspapers a day. I take the New York Times and the Kitsap Sun and the Seattle Times, and I read them all. But I know that's not where it's going. What is the future of newspapers?
Well, I don't know. I can't. I don't know what it is. We try to guess and we try to make changes based on what we think will be good for us. I certainly believe really strongly that there needs to be a future, whether it's a newspaper or just journalism. The way we look at it sometimes is there needs to be a future for journalism. And that's what, and people really need to understand.
And for holding people accountable.
Right, which I think are all elements of journalism. And so what that looks like is going to change in the years to come. I certainly hope it's something we can find a way that's, financially sustainable is important, but also I think what's more important is for cities and towns to realize the value that if you don't have a group of people performing this work, you're much worse off for it. There's an interesting study that came out last fall that said it looked at cities with a newspaper and cities without, and it compared them. Cities without newspapers, their residents pay higher bond rates. They are not as efficient with their tax money. There's all sorts of things that you'd think, well, I don't need to read the news. Someone may think this. It doesn't pertain to me. I'm not interested in any of that stuff. I don't want to read that stuff. Well, maybe you don't. But you need to realize if that goes away, it's going to hurt you where you do where you are going to feel it.
I think newspapers say a lot about who we are as a culture. And I don't know what percentage of people get their newspaper online versus get it delivered. What does that look like?
It's changed quite a bit. It's actually, so one of the things that's a strategy of ours right now is to acquire digital subscriptions. And this is it's the same business model as it was before. Instead of getting a printed newspaper, you're going to pay to read the work online. And you need to pay for it because that's what pays the people, our reporters in the room who do it. And so that's gaining traction. People are realizing that, and I'm glad, not in a greedy sense, but that's what we need, is people to realize a couple bucks a month doesn't hurt you at all, but it makes a big difference to our business.
Right.
The numbers are catching up to one another. The number of print subscriptions, it used to be print subscriptions and 0.
Right.
It's about 2 to 1 right now. Two printed newspaper subscriptions to 1 digital subscription.
Is that a national trend? I mean, I know it's a national trend, but is that a percentage that's pretty true?
I don't know. I can't say on the ratio. I know the Seattle Times is probably a little higher on the print one from what I know of there. It's just to name one local comparison. But the third piece of that is how many individuals actually read. Now, you've never had a clear sense of how many people read a newspaper because you get one at your house, doesn't necessarily mean your wife reads it or your daughter reads it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I never knew. But now with the digital statistics, we can have a good sense of how many people show up each day. And there's about 30,000 people who come to our website every day, unique visitors a day. And so that's a good number.
That is a good number.
That's higher than print circulation has been for a long time. Now, like I said, one paper might have been 3 people, so you can't make apples and apples. But so we feel good about that. But there's 250,000 people who live in the community, so there's still room to grow. And what we want to get is more of that 250 reading each day.
Maybe the impact in a positive way will be more people will read the news than before.
Yes.
Because it's easier to access it, right?
Yes.
My wife works for the Nordstrom Corporation, so big retailer with lots of stores. And boy, that's pretty dramatic what they're seeing. I mean, people now, online, get it in 24 hours, delivered to their door, and you can send it back if you want. And you know, they're all going through the same thing. How do we maintain this opportunity for people to come into the store and shop around like you and I, or at least I do, love to do, versus the people that just, they don't want to come in the store.
Yeah.
And big challenge. So
Yeah.
this whole digital world is just changing for everybody.
It is.
For everybody.
I say that a lot because it's easy to get, you know, get pessimistic about our industry or something, and there's a lot of reasons, but we're no different than any other business.
No.
Everyone's dealing with digital changes and people's habits changing and society,
And
we're going
this
to hang
is
with
a
it too.
little off the conversation, but as I watch, especially young people, and I watch people on the ferry, and you watch people, they're not communicating. They've got this in their ear, right? And you watch kids in schools, and some schools now in districts are outlawing them. In France, you can't bring your smartphone to school, right? And what is that doing to the future of our ability to communicate with each other, to share conversations, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot to worry about. I mean, there's a lot of great, and it's not going anywhere.
Right.
We know that.
Yeah.
But I think there are a lot of things that are going to, and a lot of it's so negative and so
Well,
biased, and so you're not sure you're getting the truth,
exactly.
right?
No,
When I read a newspaper, I'm pretty confident that what I'm reading has been researched and people have pretty clear it's whatever the truth is, that it's true. I just, maybe I'm naive, but
No, I don't think you're naive at all, and that's something that, again, it's something to easily get pessimistic about. But I know it's a minority of people who really have that sort of view. And when you know, it's very easy to know who the Sun reporters are. Now, I don't know anyone who works at CNN. I don't know anyone who works at Fox News. I never will, probably. But it's people who work at the Kitsap Sun live in your neighborhood.
That's right.
They're not lying to you. They're doing their best. Now,
I agree.
life is imperfect. Does every single story have every detail? No, they don't. But it's a human being who will admit a mistake and will do their best to tell you what they're going.
Fake news, right?
Yeah.
So we're become so separated in our view of the world, in all over the world, in our country. And there's just things, if you're part of this group, you don't believe what that point of view. If you're part of that group, you don't, and you guys face that all the time. And
Well, and when you say we do a little bit.
people in the media.
People in the media, yeah, and I like to draw the distinction between people in the media and the Kitsap Sun. This is an important thing to me because, and you hear that kind of criticism sometimes, but stop and read the Sun and tell me where. We're not writing about Congress. We're not writing about scandal. I mean, we're showing up at stuff that happens in town. We're telling you what the business opened. Local news, we're part of the media, but it's a very distinct
You're
part.
more part of the
different.
community.
We're more a part of the community.
Yeah.
And what I think is interesting is, you know, whether you're trying to analyze us as liberals or conservatives or whatever. Well, there's liberals and conservatives in your town. I mean, that's what a community is.
That's right.
And so, you know, that opinion page, it's a voice for any perspective.
I'm a big fan of the New York Times and have been for a long time. And I have friends that say, I wouldn't read that liberal rag, you know, yada, yada, yada. One of the great newspapers in the world, right? And there's some people now that don't believe half of what's in there.
Right, that's a troubling.
That's such a shame. I want to skip over to some other stuff now. Kitsap County is going to see, we've been pretty much, in my opinion, having served as mayor of the city and a few other things, we've been pretty much a slow growth community. Military based, maybe 1% growth a year, not a lot. It seems to me from everything we're hearing now, that's going to change pretty dramatically. And basically, I think because of what's going on in Seattle with the cost of housing and the other issues Seattle and King County are facing, people are all of a sudden starting to look to Kitsap County as an option to live because we've got the fast ferry now and you can get over here pretty quick, and you can't buy a house in King County or Bellevue or any of those places for less than $700,000. So what do you see in the next 20 years as, if we're going to maybe even double the population, I mean, we're 250 now. If you grow at 1.5% a year, you're probably going to add up to, maybe not quite double. What do you see as the challenges and the benefits of all that?
This week we've been reporting on some transportation issues in the paper that I think is at the heart of this thing that we got to figure out. And the fast ferry, the difference it has made in Bremerton already, and what's going to happen on the north end and then the south end is really interesting to me. I think a lot of people make an assumption, and part of it is because I think Seattle media portrayed this when the Rich Passage 1 launched, that if you can't afford Seattle, go to Bremerton. And I'm sure that happened a little bit. But if you can't go to Seattle and you can get to North Kitsap really quickly, to me that's going to have a much more pronounced impact up there than it has in Bremerton. That's what I'm guessing. There's probably more room to develop. Yeah. Those are the cities, those are communities that are going to really see it. And so the impact of the fast ferry is, to me, an incredible question towards how we handle that type of growth, people who still need to work. And then the other one is Kitsap Transit's bus service. You know, that's been a complaint for a long time from people who've lived here a long time, saying that it's not enough, I can't get where I need to be, elderly people need it. You know, Kitsap Transit has promised to put more money into those buses. This week we reported in the paper about they are instituting some of the new routes that I think are going to make a difference to people who either are coming here or fed up with the traffic, because traffic's something you got to handle that.
Are you like me, David? You assume we're going to see pretty significant growth?
We've talked about this before. I don't assume the same. I assume not quite.
My numbers are a little higher.
Yours are a little higher than what I would think. And I'm not an expert at this. But I know we've talked about that. I think you're right, though. I think it is going to grow.
And you and I have talked about this. I think it's time right now to begin thinking 20 years out. Seattle didn't do it with homelessness. They didn't do it when Amazon went in and they didn't realize they were going to have a housing problem and they put it off. New York, part of why they turned down Amazon were some of the problems that Seattle's experiencing. They didn't answer enough of the questions for the people that were concerned. They weren't ready. So I'm a big believer that 20 years goes pretty fast and that we need to be prepared. So I hope we do. I want to ask you a couple more questions, and we're running out of time. This has gone too fast. The Sun stopped endorsing political candidates, by and large. You don't endorse a candidate.
Right.
You used to. Why did you stop endorsing candidates?
We tweaked it. I think to say we'd stopped would be inaccurate. Now, the former editor Gene Gisley in the 70s and 80s, he stopped. They would not touch it on the editorial. That was his belief. So when I took over as the editor, there was a tradition of endorsing, and we would still have them come in for the interviews and do the rest.
Right.
What's changed in the last maybe 3 years now is my belief that the editorial, our board that meets, community board, group of citizens that changes in, so I get different perspectives, different political beliefs, all the rest, that still has value, and we keep doing that tradition. That board has the ability to interview, and that's what we've done. In the past, you interviewed and wrote something like this. What we decided was, I don't need to tell you this or this. I need to tell you what I heard in the interview. And so we changed it slightly. We videotape the interviews and publish them so you can see what we heard. And then we write a piece. Sometimes they are much more favorable towards one person than the other. I admit that. But that's because in the conversation,
that doesn't bother me a bit.
One person was stronger than the other, and we're going to tell you one came across stronger. But sometimes, I mean, what happens in local elections is sometimes you got two folks who just care about their community and want to do right. So for me to do the thumbs up, thumbs down, I don't feel as good about that as saying, hey reader, this is what we heard, this is what this person's saying, this is what they're saying. This is what you should be thinking about. So I feel like we're still informing your vote.
I want to challenge you on that a little bit. There's nobody has more impact, I shouldn't say nobody, than a community than its local elected officials. They determine who spends the money, how much they spend, what we do. I mean, it's really an important job. The city council is an important job, the mayor is an important job, county commission, they have a huge impact. And so now we elect people mostly because they've got the best social media program, or they knocked on the most doors, or so that, all that sort of stuff. But it seems to me there's always a place for an independent assessment. Somebody that you can trust that says, all right, this person's probably the best candidate. Or this person's done a good job in their first term, and they're worthy of being reelected. I think that's important. And now in Seattle, they have the municipal league. And when I was an elected official in the Seattle area, I used to go interview with the municipal league, and I really wanted their highest rating, and I wanted their endorsement. And it was important because they were respected. I'm sad to see that independent voice that you can trust go away.
But the voice is still there. Maybe that's where I'd argue back. I think we've retained the voice, and I still want to write something from this group of people's perspective that helps you make your choice. Yeah. What I felt was happening, it was turning into this parlor game of, did they pick the Dems or the Repubs? Yeah. And I didn't want that. I wanted to get away from that and say, no, we're going to tell you something interesting. If someone is unfit, and we've done this, you can look back and you can read through them. When there's an unfit person on that ballot, we've told people. We've said they are not qualified for this job. Good. Or if they have some maybe glaring thing there,
for the media,
we've pointed that out in the opinion section.
Okay, we're running out of time. This could have gone on for 2 hours. Is there anything you want to close with that we haven't talked about real quickly that you think is important on this issue of leadership, and how important leadership is to our community?
Well, yeah, I think you've said this before, and a lot of times. I think I've heard you talk about vision, and that's really important. I think that's maybe the key part of it. Is
where are we going in the next 20? There's an old saying: if you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter how you get there.
Yeah, and I think that's for every person. You need to think through that question, whether you're a community leader, whether you're not. What is your vision? And that's what, those columns I was referencing, that's what they're trying to do, is what do you think the vision is for your town? And that's very valuable.
And getting people involved in that. Well, I want to thank you, David.
You're welcome.
You were my first guest, and you're a person I've always admired, not always agreed with, but always admired as a person with good values and good for the community and good character. Yeah. So thanks for joining us. And I want to remind everyone that this is being sponsored by Leadership Kitsap. It was a pleasure to be with you today, and we'll be meeting and having conversations with future leaders in our community. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.
Leadership Kitsap is our community's civic leadership program. Leadership Kitsap fosters and empowers educated, prepared, and engaged community leaders. For over 25 years, we have cultivated leaders that work collaboratively to create positive change, dedicated to making our community a better place to work and live. We expose our class to Kitsap's leaders across public, private, and nonprofit sectors. We're happy to bring many of the conversations with these leaders to you. Strong leaders build strong communities.